So what I wanted to do today is go over some of the terminology we went through last week. Just for, firstly, I came up with a little bit of a better example that I thought will explain it a little bit better. And also, I think it's important to continually review these things. I'm thinking about and reading about these things a lot. And I know I give the class once a week. It's very possible and likely that most of the people on this call or, who listen to this have lives that are, further away from the digital asset space, and they might think about it when they read an article or when I ping them with something in this class. But it's, certainly I think a little bit of a review is a good thing. Then I'm going to go into a couple of use cases of NFTs and digital assets. Again, they're not going to be any digital art there, I'm pretty sure, or at least not exclusively. And then we're going to do a quick comparison between digital assets and physical assets, which will eventually next lead into how are people making money. So firstly, the F in NFT is fungible, but then we actually have, it's called non-fungible. So what does fungibility mean? So fungibility means that the differences between two things have no relevance in our lives whatsoever. So for example, goodness gracious, for example, 2 pennies, I can have a penny and you can have a penny. They are distinct pennies, right? Maybe one of them is discolored and I could pick them out of a group, but they are worth the exact same amount. There's no important characteristics that we care about them that make one different from another. If I go into a bank and I put a penny down and then I end up getting another penny, it doesn't, it doesn't really matter. Whereas non-fungible, here's a picture of 2 different Cape Cod style houses. As you could see, they are similar in many ways, but clearly they're not the same. And even if they were structurally and visibly and economically the same, my house is not your house. There's clearly a difference between them. And so this is something that would be non-fungible. So, and that's really the concept that we have to understand. The concept of non-fungibility is just being able to track unique objects through the world. But something to realize also is that with digital assets, that's not always going to be necessary. There are some cases in which we're going to want to be able to track one specific thing. And there's other cases in which we're going to want to track things that are going to be more like pennies. We want to know how much of it we have, but it doesn't necessarily matter if I have this one or that one or any other one. I'm going to stop there. Anybody have any questions? Don't see anything on here, so I'm going to assume no. Excellent.
Ben, quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is a silly question here, but if there's like a
no silly questions at all.
Prefab home, like you see homes that are developed the same way in the same lots, and there's really no distinguishable difference between the two of them, although there might in reality be some small minor differences. Would you say those are non-fungible houses or fungible houses?
So I don't really know, but I want to make sure, like, I suppose it's an interesting question. I'm not really, well, sorry about that. I'm definitely going to edit that out.
No worries.
No. So, probably I would say that those 2 things are non-fungible anyway, because one of them is going to be owned by one person who's going to attach some emotion to it and put up pictures of their lives and put in their stuff, and somebody else is going to do something else. But even if they were, I think the main point is to understand how the concept relates in general, even if specific cases we might be a little bit confused. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Mike, did you have a question?
No, I'm good.
Awesome. And then the second thing we wanted to talk about was the concept of divisibility. Now here we have, on both sides, we have $20. On the left hand, we have a $20 bill, and on the right hand, we have 2 tens. So we see that with USD and with many currencies, there is a concept of divisibility. And divisibility is really, really important because if you're going to be a currency, and many cryptocurrencies and coins claim to be, it's very important that you have the ability to be able to, if nothing else, make change. But we also have the idea of indivisibility, which also exists sometimes within the digital world and certainly within the physical world. Here, what I've done is I've put a picture on the left of an acceptance letter from Princeton University, and on the right, I've put two halves of those of that acceptance letter. Clearly, unique items like an acceptance letter, like a deed to a house. Let's not talk about ownership percentages, but without loss of generality. If you talk about tickets, if you talk about a ring, for example, anything that is in a finalized form, that has parts. Maybe I'm getting a little bit too esoteric, but without loss of generality, certainly there is a concept of indivisibility, and it's important to know the differences as we look in the crypto space. So now what I wanted to do is talk about 4 different use cases where you'd have different kinds of tokens and how they might work within a digital space and why they're going to be important moving forward. So on the bottom right, we have tickets. We mentioned it last week, and for people who were there, or people who saw the video, excellent, you can go back to it. But one of the things we looked at is the concept of tickets, how already there are various events that are happening in the physical world that either have their tickets as NFTs or have their tickets being NFT options. We gave the example last week of the Dallas Mavericks who are going to be issuing their tickets as NFTs. And also we went into why it's financially makes sense for the Mavericks and also why it makes sense for the buyer, which brings home a little bit why it would be necessary to learn about these things, because at one point when the critical mass is getting most of their tickets as NFTs, it's just going to be financially more beneficial for the Mavericks to put them out exclusively as NFTs for tons of different reasons. If we look at another case, I want to go just to the top left. So for anybody who has gone to college and graduated and received a degree and then had to apply for, let's say, 2 or 3 jobs after that, it's not necessarily true, but oftentimes you have to prove your the degrees that you have. You either fill out what degrees you have and then they go do the background search for you, or sometimes not really if you're getting a job. But I remember, I think when I had to apply to grad school, I actually had to get copies of those degrees from the institutions that gave them to me. Now, that's a very inefficient process for lots of reasons, none the least of which is that it's very possible that you could get a degree from an institution that no longer exists. So that doesn't necessarily mean that your credentials shouldn't exist. So there are various use cases that are already in existence right now. Cardano is working on one that will credentialize essentially you. So instead of earning a credential and having that credential live exclusively within a database owned by the institution that why am I not thinking of the word? It's not distribute. I forget I can't think of the verb, but issued maybe is the word. The institution that issued it to you, it makes a lot more sense both for them and for you to be able to keep that credential in a verifiable space on the blockchain that you can give access to the individuals and organizations that you need and want to at any period of time. That doesn't mean to say, going on a question that we had last week, that everything that is within the NFT, or I shouldn't even say NFT because it wouldn't necessarily always be one, but we shouldn't necessarily think that all of the information within the digital asset would be available to anybody who knew your digital wallet, but just that digital assets are a way to present this information. So for example, I know I'm speaking a little bit esoterically, it's a little bit late. For example, you might have a digital asset that on the front of it said California State University Long Branch. And then if I gave you access, you would have certain revealable information, which would give you access to the underlying information, which would say Ben Milch graduated from this institution on this day. He got this degree. He took these classes, et cetera, et cetera. And then I would have ownership over that credential myself, and I would be able to give access to that information to whomever I wanted. It would put all the power in my hands and also be much more efficient for any people that needed that information in the future, saving tons of time in background checks and other garbage. Any questions on that one? Because I know I spoke for a little bit. All right. So if we go to the top right, one of the things that's really interesting here is I wanted to talk about gaming for a little bit. Now, right now, we certainly do have digital games, but they all exist within their operating systems, which means that all of the information about them exists solely within the databases owned by the companies that maintain them. Now, this has a couple different difficulties. Number one, it really means that oftentimes you're renting the things that you have. You're not really buying them because you can't necessarily sell them to other people. And number two, they're not transferable outside the system as things get older and change. For example, if I had something in the Legend of Zelda game on Nintendo 64, and then I had a different Nintendo operating system, anything that I had in one Zelda system, even though it's still Nintendo, doesn't necessarily go onto just a different operating system within the same universe. Now, the reason that gaming is particularly interesting to me is that there are parts of gaming and the tokens associated with gaming that have an NFT aspect and also a non-NFT aspect. Now, what do I mean by that? Again, when we think about the term NFT, I know, okay, that was a text, but not from one of you guys. So again, when we think about the term NFT and we think about this concept of fungibility, in a game, I might have some kind of utility, right? I might have a sword. So that sword might be something that is unique within the game. However, the money that my character has within the game is not necessarily unique. So I don't necessarily have to have an NFT representing the amount of Zelda dollars that I have to be able to purchase the potions and weapons and things that I need within the game. But each one of those things that I do purchase would be something that would need to be uniquely tracked, especially if they're particularly rare. So there are some tokens which are able to manage both unique and non-unique aspects of various ownership types that would exist within gaming and other such places. Any questions there? Okay, excellent. And then the fourth one that I wanted to go to, and really there are a ton of others, but the reason I wanted to get to the use cases is because I really wanted to make sure that people had a lot of ideas in their head of how important learning about this space is and how broad the areas that are going to be touched. Because if we only think about it as digital art, yes, that is a very big space. But physical art is also a big space, and most of the people on the call don't collect a lot of it. So it's important that we don't get confused by, various things that we read, and we try to understand that all the different places that it hits. So now if we look at a mortgage, it is very, very likely that a mortgage that you or I will have in the future will be run on a digital blockchain. And the reason for this is because not only do some digital assets have the ability to have this non-fungibility, but they also, certain ones, have the ability to have smart contracts within them. Now, essentially a smart contract is a piece of, essentially is a computer program, which tells, I guess the thing itself, what to do when various transactions are entered into the system. So for example, you might have a mortgage, I have a mortgage, right, with a mortgage company, and you might have an NFT govern that mortgage. What does that mean? What that means is that as you pay off your mortgage or don't pay it, those various payments are directed automatically to the places that they need to go, which is particularly helpful in cases, which happens very frequently today, where the originator of your mortgage is not the person or entity that holds it long term. And there might be various ways in which your mortgage isn't even held in whole by one institution. This also creates the ability to lessen a lot of the insurances like title insurance, which I'll get to in another lecture. I shouldn't say lecture, another session. By having code that is immutable, we don't have any of the discrepancies of who really owns something, where is it, can I find it? Any questions there? All right, excellent. So now I wanted to talk about the difference between physical assets and digital assets, which we'll get into much more detail in next week's, I guess, on Sunday. So I spoke about this a little bit in the WhatsApp group that some of us are in. Physical assets work exactly the opposite from the way digital assets do. For physical assets, you have to protect them because that is the way that you prove that you own them. Your money is yours only because when you reach into your pocket, you find it there. I know that my couch is mine because it's in my house. If I saw it in your house, I would have a hard time saying it's anything else but your couch. Digital assets work the exact opposite. Digital assets don't necessarily exist anywhere in the world, but instead of putting the asset into my wallet, I put my name directly on the asset so that I don't ever have to protect it because no one can ever use it for anything except if that person happens to be me. And this is a very important point, which I'm going to probably stress and go over a lot. But digital assets work so that your name is essentially emblazoned on the asset. And the reason that's important is, I'll give you a very quick example. For anybody, and I know at least one person on the call has had this experience, for anybody who's ever had a MetaMask account, you might try to open a MetaMask account or look into your account and find that you can't see all of the assets that you believe that you have in there. And you might get very worried and concerned that somehow you lost something. But what you have to understand is in the digital space, when you have a wallet, like a MetaMask account, or really even a Coinbase account, it's really a visualization tool and not actually an account. You don't open an account at MetaMask and put anything into that account. What you do is you open an account with MetaMask and prove to them who you are on the blockchain, what digital wallets you own on the blockchain, and then they visualize to you what assets have that public wallet address emblazoned on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man, the way you explained it to me that one time, it's not like opening a bank account or brokerage account and I buy 10 shares of Apple in my brokerage account, and my brokerage account holds those shares in that account, in whatever financial institution I've got my shares in. It's not like that. I purchase something and then my name is stamped, branded, whatever you want, like a cattle brand on that asset. And I'll be able to find my asset on any type of digital wallet that I set up. Doesn't matter if it's MetaMask, doesn't matter if it's Coinbase, doesn't matter if it's whatever, name it. Essentially, I'll be able to see it on any of those. It's just going to reflect in whatever wallet I decide to download or use or whatever.
That's 100% correct. And the reason that's correct, and this is again why we're going to get into this next week, is because essentially every person who quote unquote participates in a given blockchain, meaning that they help maintain that blockchain as a miner or such things, downloads a copy of the entire blockchain, meaning the entire ledger, every asset, who has owned it throughout time and who currently owns it, everybody has a copy of all of that information. And essentially what they're doing is continually making sure that all of their copies match. So as long as all of their copies match, everyone is in agreement to who as to who owns what. So yes, these accounts like MetaMask or other ones, OpenSea, you can look at, actually, as OpenSea is better in some ways. What they're essentially doing is reading that blockchain file and visualizing to you what it says that you own. In that sense, if you think about it, digital assets are actually much more secure and real than physical assets. Because if I own, I spend half my life looking around my house for my phone because I can never find it. The need to find things is a constant concern, at least for me. But in the digital world, you don't need to find anything. Everything is available for you because you can identify yourself positively. Now, the reverse is also true. If you ever lose the ability to identify yourself on that blockchain, then those assets really do become lost. And when you hear those stories, you'll read them in the newspaper, not in the newspaper, right? Online, about somebody losing $180 billion or $180 million or whatever in Bitcoin. What that means is that they created a way to identify themselves on a blockchain, obviously not with a driver's license, but with other such mechanisms, and they lost those things. So it's called, for example, your seed phrase. So your seed phrase, at least on Ethereum and other places, is a unique way to identify yourself on a blockchain. If you forget that, nobody else can use it, but you can't use those assets either.
It's a password.
That makes sense to anybody else other than Mike? Gershon, Gill, Jacob.
Yeah, we're here.
Awesome. I'm glad. Excellent.
How does one protect that seed phrase or password from getting lost? Is it
You
possible?
put it on a sticky and then you put that on your laptop.
So now you're back to your physical asset.
Yeah.
Well, so it's interesting. It's interesting that you're saying that, because I was going to go even more physical. You can write it on a note card. That's a really, really safe way. Now, yes, that's a physical. I mean, yes, it's a physical thing, but we're not anti-physical things, right? A mortgage, if it could be advantageous to run my mortgage or to manage my house with a digital asset, but I'm going to physically live in it in the world. You know what I mean? I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
Awesome. And yeah, but sure, there's certainly a number of different ways to protect them. I just write it down. That's how I do it personally. Also, I never leave my house, so that also is a help. It's a COVID thing, I guess. There you go. We got one left. So honestly, I know that I covered a little bit. I only wanted to do a little bit of chunks each week because I don't know how much everybody is going to be able to retain and things like that, and where everybody is on different levels. I will say that next week we're going to get into really what mining is and how people get paid, and a little bit into the intrinsic value of blockchains in general. Does anybody have any questions? Certainly you can text me or email me any questions, but if anybody has them now, for sure I'll answer.
So Ben, you keep all your passwords in a notebook?
I have one digital, I have a couple different digital wallets. I have one for which I am the custodian, and I have one seed phrase for that account, and I do keep it written down.
And that opens up other accounts for you?
No. So, okay, so let's get a little bit more further. So there's two different kinds of accounts that you can have. One is called a custodial account, and the other is a non-custodial account. So a custodial account is exactly the way you could think about it at a brokerage firm. right? They're holding your shares for you, but they're your shares. So if you have a Coinbase account, that's a custodial account. What they do is they have essentially one big account that holds all of the ETH and Bitcoin and Cardano and Solana and Polkadot and whichever coins you're interested in. And then they have the seed phrase for those accounts, and then they allocate those to the different people. Now, there's a couple benefits to that. One of the benefits to that is that you won't have to worry about losing your seed phrase. Good. Another benefit is that if you wanted to transfer from one account to another account, you can do that with what is called off-chain, which means you wouldn't have to pay any transaction fees. We'll get into that a little bit more next week. You can also, so that's what's called a custodial account. Coinbase controls, owns the seed phrase for the accounts, and you operate with it with a simple username and password like you do with your, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citibank account. There's also non-custodial accounts, which are the ones that are predominantly used for digital assets that aren't exclusively cryptocurrencies. So NFTs, digital art, and certainly a lot of these other kinds of things. So in most of those situations, they are not supported on custodial account platforms. And in those cases, you'd have a non-custodial account, which means that you personally hold your own seed phrase, and essentially you are, using MetaMask to visualize to you what you own. So so in those cases, I do. In that one case, I do have that. Essentially, just to give you a little bit about the makeup of some of the things that I own and how that works. So I do have a Coinbase account. That's a custodial account. I did purchase some of that Space Jam NFT, if anybody purchased into that. So if you did, you noticed that you didn't get any kind of seed phrase, that's also a custodial account. They're holding it for you and essentially let you transfer out. I also own some NBA Top Shot. That's also a custodial account. You can get your seed phrase from them. And then I own some NFTs, which I hold in, I hold the seed phrase for that digital wallet.
So the non-custodial accounts, they just show you what you own, because what you own is held on the blockchain floating out in cyberspace.
Well, technically everything is showing you what you own. The difference is that how you access it and who actually owns that seed phrase or doesn't own that seed phrase,
or who holds it.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Who holds it?
MetaMask is non-custodial, so MetaMask doesn't hold the assets. They just show you what you own. So back when I said they just stamp your name like a cattle iron on it and it floats in space somewhere, you own it. It's got I don't know, I forget what it's called. But anyways, it's got your name stamped on it. You can find it out in cyberspace somewhere because it's got your name stamped on it. Whereas the coins that you own in Coinbase holds those.
That is correct.
Okay,
and within their system, right? They'll say we own 1,000 Ethereum or Ether, right? And then within their system, they'll say Mike owns 1, Ben owns 1, Gershon owns 2, Gil owns 3, Jacob owns 4, stuff like that. And there's advantages and disadvantages to both of those situations, which we'll go into a little bit more next week. Actually, a lot more, but yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions anybody had? Excellent. Thank you guys so much. If you have any questions, hit me up. I will put this on YouTube if you want to give any kind of feedback, real feedback, even if you hated it. Ben, you were boring. It was the same thing as last week, or it was not so much more, or whatever it is, it's all good. Would love to hear it. Thank you so much. And if I don't speak to you before that, we'll speak on Sunday.
Later.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you very much.